$15,000. Who can make the shot right now?
The old man stood at the firing line for 40 seconds before he even chambered the round, and Brent Whitcomb was already losing patience. "Pop, you sure you want to do this? It's a 100-yard shot of bad publicity if your shoulder gives out." The old man didn't answer. He was watching the flag on the pole at the 700-yard berm, and behind it the yellow ribbon someone had tied to a fence stake at the 200 marker, and behind that the heat shimmer rising off the gravel road that ran along the south side of the range. He held a beat-up M1903 Springfield that had defeated 87 men over the weekend, and one woman who'd thrown the empty bolt at the cardboard sign on her way out. The booth behind him advertised in red letters 6 feet tall, $15,000 if you can hit the plate at 700. The rifle in his hands was 40 years older than the man who built the booth. If you respect a Marine who waited 3 days to take one shot, type Semper Fi in the comments, because what happened in the next 90 seconds is going to make the manufacturer of America's most expensive precision rifles wish they'd never invited a 78-year-old to their expo. His name was Earl Hennessy. He'd come to the expo because his daughter Linda had a craft booth across the parking lot at the county fairground, and she dropped him off at the entrance with a folded brochure and the same expression his wife used to give him before doctor's appointments. He hadn't been to a range in 9 years. He hadn't picked up a rifle since the spring his wife Margaret was diagnosed. He'd walked the expo floor for 2 hours and seen rifles that cost more than his first house. He'd watched a man on a sponsored stage explain first-round cold-bore precision with a graphic that showed 3 concentric circles and an asterisk. He'd watched a teenager in a sponsored hat sell binoculars that adjusted themselves to the user's heart rate. And then he'd seen the booth at the back. The booth belonged to Halverson Precision, a company that made bolt-action rifles starting at $12,000 and went up from there, and the challenge was a marketing stunt and everyone knew it. Hand a competitor a surplus M 1903. Springfield with the original Buffington pattern rear sight. Point them at a 10-inch steel plate 700 yards away. Give them 3 rounds of unmatched commercial .30-06 ball and watch them miss. The implication was that even cheap precision was hard, and that Halverson's $17,000 Sendero 2 was worth every penny. The booth had been running since Friday morning. 87 entrants, 0 hits. The rifle had a name, written on the underside of the stock in black Sharpie by some unknown previous owner, Cold Stella. Brent Whitcomb was 34 and had been working precision rifle expos for 6 years. He had not served, and he did not pretend to have served, and he sold rifles to men who liked the idea of long-range shooting more than they liked the practice of it. He was good at it because he never overpromised and never apologized. When Earl approached the booth at 3:15 on Sunday afternoon, Brent had been watching the clock. The expo closed at 5. He had not paid out the prize, and his manager had told him there would be a steak dinner if the weekend ended the way it had started. "How much?" Earl asked. "50 for 3 rounds, 3 shots, 10-inch steel at 700. Brent's smile was practiced. "You ever shot a distance before, sir?" "A bit." "You bring your reading glasses." Earl looked at him then, a long, patient look that Brent later described to his manager as the look his grandfather used to give him before he made him dig out the rose bed. Earl set 320s on the counter. "Keep the change." A man in a folding chair 10 feet away watched this without speaking. His name was Marcus Tremaine. He was 41 years old. He had spent 11 years in Army Ranger battalions and 3 more as a contract shooter on a circuit he did not talk about. He had missed the plate twice that morning with Cold Stella, gone home for lunch, and come back because he couldn't sleep with the missing. He had been watching the booth ever since, drinking warm coffee waiting for someone to hit. He had a theory about the rifle, and he was beginning to think the theory was wrong. He watched the old man take the rifle from Brent, and the way the old man took it changed his afternoon. Earl held the M1903 the way another man holds a child. He broke the bolt open and looked at the chamber wall, not the cartridge, but the chamber wall itself, for tooling marks or pitting. He turned the rifle over and ran his thumb along the front edge of the magazine well, feeling for a burr. He worked the bolt 3 times, listening to the lug seat, listening for any rattle in the cocking piece. He pulled the rear ladder sight up and back down. He checked the front sight blade for chip and the rear notch for fouling. He tested the trigger weight against the safety with his thumb. He set the rifle down on the bench, butt toward him, the way a man sets down a tool he intends to use, not a curiosity he is examining, and then he walked 4 steps to the corner of the booth where the wind flag on the pole was visible through the gap between 2 tents, and then he stood there. For 40 seconds. He did not move. He watched the flag on the 700-yard pole. He watched the yellow ribbon at 200. He watched the heat mirage off the gravel road, the way it bent the air in long, lazy waves. He watched the dust kicked up by a sponsored utility cart 2 booths over, and the direction it carried before it settled. He saw the wind start at 5 miles per hour from his 8 o'clock and slacken to 2 by the time it reached the target. He saw it lift and twist at the 500 marker. He saw it dive 50 yards short of the plate and reform as a soft headwind for the last 100. He waited until the flag straightened, paused, and dropped back into the same lazy rhythm it had been holding for the last hour, which told him the wind was honest. Then he walked back to the bench. "We're closing in 20 minutes, Pop," Brent said. "I know," Earl said. He thumbed the rear sight elevation slider up the ladder, settled it on the 700 mark, and adjusted the windage knob a quarter turn left. He chambered the round. He did not look down at the bolt while he did it. He brought the rifle to his shoulder and his cheek to the comb in one slow motion that Marcus Tremaine, watching, recognized from 100 old training films he had been made to watch in basic. Earl's left elbow went to a place under the rifle that did not look natural to anyone who hadn't been taught, and which Marcus knew was exactly right. Earl exhaled. He held. The trigger broke. The plate rang. You could hear it through the booth's PA system, which Brent had wired to a microphone at the target 700 yards away, because the marketing department had insisted that no one would believe a miss without the audio. The bell tone of a 10-inch steel plate at 700 yards is a sound that takes about 1.5 seconds to travel back to the firing line. The crowd that had gathered, 8 or 10 people, heard it as a single clean note that hung in the air like the end of a hymn. If you've ever known an old man who quietly proved a room full of younger men wrong, type Semper Fi in the comments and tell me his name, because the next 2 minutes are going to tell you who Earl Hennessy was, and the man standing at the back of the crowd had been waiting 40 years to see this happen again. Earl ran the bolt without taking his eyes off the target. Spent brass arced over his right shoulder and bounced once on the rubber mat. He chambered, settled, exhaled, fired. The plate rang. Brent looked at the spotting scope. He looked at the plate. He looked at Earl. He looked at his radio and then at his manager, a man named Tom Brenneman, who had walked up from the Halverson Precision flagship display 30 feet away. Brenneman had been at the company 12 years. He had seen good shooters. He had not seen this. Earl ran the bolt a 3rd time. He chambered. He settled. He exhaled. He fired. The plate rang. 3 shots, 3 hits, 40 seconds of wind reading and roughly 9 seconds of shooting. The crowd, now 30 people, did not make a sound for a count of 4. A man at the back of the crowd took 2 steps forward and stopped. He was 68 years old, wearing slacks and a navy blazer and a small gold pin on his lapel that most people in the crowd would not recognize but that Marcus Tremaine had recognized from across the booth, and now sat very still in his folding chair. The man at the back of the crowd was Lieutenant General Robert Halberstam, United States Marine Corps, retired former commanding officer of Weapons Training Battalion at Quantico, 2-time winner of the Wimbledon Cup at Camp Perry, holder of the Distinguished Rifleman Badge, and one of the men still living who could legitimately call himself a graduate of the 1976 Scout Sniper Instructor course. He was at the expo as a featured speaker. He was supposed to be at a panel on long-range optics in 18 minutes, and he had wandered down to the back of the floor because he had heard a Halverson rep say there was an old man at Cold Stella who looked like he might actually try it. Halberstam walked to the firing line and stopped 6 feet behind Earl. He did not speak. He did not need to. He brought his right hand up to his brow in a salute that was 30 years out of his daily practice and held it there with his elbow at the angle a Marine never forgets. Earl turned. He saw Halberstam. He set the M1903 down on the bench, butt toward him, the way he'd set down 10,000 rifles in his career. He returned the salute. Brent stopped moving. Halberstam dropped his hand and walked the last 6 feet. He took Earl's right hand in both of his own and held it. "Master Gunny," he said. "Doc. How long has it been?" 26 years, sir." "You haven't changed." "You're lying, sir." "Yes, Master Gunny, I am." Then Halberstam turned to face the crowd and he raised his voice the way Marines raise theirs when they want a parking lot to hear them. "This is Master Gunnery Sergeant Earl Hennessy, United States Marine Corps, retired." He was the senior primary marksmanship instructor at the Marine Corps Marksmanship Training Unit at Quantico from 1972 to 1994. He is a two-time Wimbledon Cup champion at Camp Perry. He holds the Distinguished Rifleman Badge, the Distinguished Pistol Shot Badge, and the President's 100 Tab. He trained every scout sniper instructor in the United States Marine Corps for almost 20 years. He trained me. He trained the man who is teaching the long-range course at this expo tomorrow morning. The rifle he just used to make that shot is the same model that he used to qualify Distinguished in 1969. Now I would like every man and woman in earshot to look at him very carefully, because you are looking at the reason the United States Marine Corps still believes that a man with a rifle and a flagpole can do what a computer cannot. The crowd did not applaud. They didn't know whether to. Brent looked at his hands. Halberstam turned back to Earl and his voice dropped to a register only the people standing closest could hear. "How is Margaret?" Earl's shoulders moved an inch. "She passed in February, sir." Halberstam went still. "I didn't know, Earl. I'm so sorry. I should have known." "You couldn't have. We didn't put a notice in. She didn't want one." "How long had she—" "8 years. The last 3 were hard." "You took care of her?" "Yes." "And this is the first time you've—" "First time I've held a rifle in 9 years, sir. First time I've come to a range since the diagnosis. Linda asked me to come today. Margaret had wanted me to come back. She told me She told me I had to put my hands on a rifle again, or I would forget who I was. She said she wasn't going to spend her last winter watching me forget." Halberstam did not speak. Earl looked at the plate 700 yards away, ringing faintly in the wind that had carried the sound of 3 impacts. "I came here today because Linda wanted me to see the new rifles. I didn't intend to shoot. I saw the booth and I thought maybe Margaret would have laughed at it. So I came over. I'm very tired, sir. I'm going to go home and sit on the porch." Halberstam looked at Brent. Brent looked at Tom Brenneman. Brenneman looked at the locked drawer under the counter where the prize money sat in cashier's check form, already made out to winner with a blank line for the name. Brenneman walked to the drawer. He brought out the check. He brought it to Earl. "Master Gunnery Sergeant," he said, and he said it like he had been waiting his whole career to say it correctly. "We owe you $15,000. Where would you like it sent?" Earl looked at the check. He looked at Halberstam. "Sir, is the Semper Fi Fund still receiving donations?" Halberstam nodded. "All of it, please." Brenneman wrote the name on the check. Earl walked out of the booth at 3:46 in the afternoon. He walked across the expo floor past rifles that cost more than his first house. He walked past the sponsored stage and the heart rate binoculars, and the teenager in the sponsored hat. He walked out the front doors into the parking lot, where his daughter Linda was waiting at her booth across the way with a folding table of hand-stitched quilts and an iced tea that had gone warm in the afternoon sun. She looked up and saw him, and she knew, in the way daughters know, that something had happened. She didn't ask. He didn't tell her then. Behind him in the back of the expo, Brent Whitcomb was wrapping cold Stella in an old wool blanket. He had asked his manager if the company could give the rifle to the old man as a gift. The manager had said yes. Brent had asked if he could be the one to deliver it. The manager had said yes to that too. Brent did not yet know what he was going to say when he handed it over. He thought he might say thank you for letting me hold this. He thought he might just be quiet. Marcus Tremaine, the retired ranger who had watched the whole thing from his folding chair, walked over to Brent and asked if he could carry the rifle for him out to the parking lot. Brent said yes. Marcus said it would be his honour.